All right, so let's go to John 10.
I tell you the truth, the man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way, is a thief and a robber. The man who enters the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. It's nice when someone remembers your name, isn't it? And by the same token, it can be kind of disappointing when they don't. I'm not really very good with names, but I'm not as bad as our friend Curtis Franklin. You may remember Curtis. A week or two after he and Stephanie were married, they got married in Searcy, Arkansas, where I grew up. He was a student at Harding. She lived there, and she was just out of high school. And then a couple of weeks later, they were at his home church in Billings, Montana. And he was showing off his new wife for the first time. And then it occurred to him that he couldn't remember her first name. Oh, no. Yeah, he had some kind of a block, and he began to get really worried that someone was going to notice this, and he was going to have to introduce her. You know, this is my wife, Mrs. Franklin, you know. Mm-hmm. But a wife would prefer to be on a first name basis with her husband, which might have been a problem for Solomon. Think about that. Being wise is not the same as having a really good memory for names. And so having 300 wives, how many of those did he really know by name? Well, all of us would generally like for our name to be remembered. But it doesn't even help if it's just a person who's a good name memorizer. We really want someone who knows us, and that's why they remember our name. But even this rule has its exceptions. Some of you probably would have been happy, for example, if when you were in high school, if the school principal had known your name so well. Or, you know, a few of us would object if the IRS forgot our names. But it doesn't really mean that much to be remembered by a good name memorizer, but it does mean a lot if someone remembers us as well as our name, of course. We don't just want our name to be known. We want to actually be loved and cared about. And this is all about how the good shepherd knows his sheep by name because he cares about them personally. In fact, he even puts their well-being above his own. He says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. So this is about how to know who we can trust to protect us, or how we know the real thing when you see or hear it. Some of you young people don't know Coca-Cola is the real thing. Okay, but we all want to be saved, don't we? If we realize we're in danger, we would all want to be rescued, and we probably wouldn't really care too much about who that rescuer was. We wouldn't insist that it was a friend. You know, would anyone ever, ask while you're hanging off a cliff by a little branch or something? They're saying, well, I'll get you. I said, well, first of all, do you know my name? No, we wouldn't do that. But people have, even given their lives to save people that they've never seen before. But we don't really think of them as so much as being loving when they do that. We're more impressed than we are touched or moved. What touches us is when we see maybe a mother or father give their life for a child, or a husband give his life for a wife, or a friend for a friend. But think about this. Which is more remarkable? Is it when someone lays down his life for someone that he or she doesn't know, or when someone lays down their life for someone they love. It would seem more remarkable to do that for a stranger, but there's one factor that could make it more remarkable to lay down your life for someone you know really well. You see, when we know someone really well, we may know that they do not deserve to be rescued. A fireman hears a voice screaming inside a burning house, and he just hears a scared, desperate human being. And so that voice may be the one who set the fire, or it may even be the voice of a rapist. But the fireman doesn't know that. He just knows that someone needs help. But if your friend is in a burning house, it might be logical first to think about all the lousy things that he or she has done to you over the years before you plunge into the flames. When we lived in Kansas, my best friend in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades was Ronnie Kelper. And one time, Ronnie convinced me to put a little bit of padding in my pants and let him shoot me in the backside with a BB gun. Well, guess what? He shot me in the leg. And then, another time he somehow stuck a dart in me. And then another time he was chasing me with a propane torch that was lit, and he stumbled and fell and burned a tattoo on my arm that was there for years. It's finally kind of gone away. But if Ronnie had been in serious trouble, I probably, in spite of all of that, would have gone ahead and helped him. But it might have made sense to think about those things that he had done before that. So not too many of us would think that way, I hope. But here's what I'm getting at. Jesus knows us and lays down his life for us. But he doesn't lay down his life because he doesn't know whether we deserve to live. He knows very well that we do not actually deserve to live. He doesn't save us because we've never brought him anything but joy. In fact, we've been a real pain much of the time. And we run off from the flock. We get tangled up in sin. So he has to stay out looking for us late into the night. Or we push and shove when it comes time to be fed, and we trample on each other. We walk in the water trough and knock the feed all over everywhere. We even sometimes start butting each other out of the way and get into fights. I'm not describing a church potluck. I'm talking about real life. Yet when we're in danger, he doesn't stop and consider whether we're worth the trouble. He lays down his life without a moment's hesitation. He actually lays down his life in spite of the fact that he knows us so well. But he doesn't treat it that way. He doesn't draw attention to his own nobility or to the fact that we don't deserve his care. He somehow values us even as we are. He is not out to make us feel more guilty because he has to save us. Once again, on the contrary, in saving us, he lifts us up and gives us a deeper sense of true worth, of love. Now, for our part, sheep don't feel guilty about their shepherd rescuing them, do they? They just feel relieved and appreciated, loved and secure. And that's how Jesus wants us to feel. So the shepherd comparison is a beautiful one, but even that doesn't quite cover everything that Jesus provides for the sheep. He also says he is the gate. What does that mean? He's talking about the gate to the sheepfold. That's where he started. I tell you the truth, a man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Therefore, Jesus said again, I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who ever came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. He will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Shepherds in the Middle East at that time, and even some today, would often be a part of a sort of cooperative. They'd take their own sheep out during the day to pasture, but there would be one fold where several shepherds would take their sheep at night, and they'd hire a watchman to protect the sheep from robbery by rustlers or from attack by wolves or lions or bears. And that fold might have had high walls and one narrow gate so that the watchman could could monitor the whole flock. So the watchman's job was to see that the sheep were there for the shepherds when they came in the morning for their sheep. But the sheep weren't his. The shepherds took care of that. They knew their own sheep, and their sheep knew them, so that when they arrived, they could give a call. You heard that farmer give a call before he started saying the same thing that all of those others were trying to call the sheep by. And then he did this. He said the same thing that they said. So they give a call, and all of their own flock would come, but none of the other sheep would come. If one or two sheep were missing, then he might call them by name. He probably didn't call every sheep by name every day. But you can you can see the importance of the gate. We don't relate to that quite as much these days, in this community. But gates and entrances of any kind were strategically planned in more primitive societies. At Mesa Verde National Park, has anyone else ever been there? You should go if you haven't. There's a whole canyon that has ruins of dozens of cliff dwellings, which date to long before Columbus discovered America. And one of these is called Balcony House because it was built in a cave high in the middle of a sheer rock cliff. Here's a kind of a close-up of it, and then here's where it is in the cliff. So from the bottom of the canyon, it was only reachable by climbing the cliff using footholds that were chiseled into the rock. And their women carried water from the bottom of the canyon up this cliff in clay pots on their heads. And there was a lot of broken pottery at the bottom. But only one person could climb this route at a time. And they had to start with the correct foot first. Because in the middle of the cliff, you reached a point at which there was a jog. And if you had started on the wrong foot, you couldn't reach the next step. So you'd either have to go all the way down or start all over, or you might just fall from that point. But the footholds only went almost to the cave. Near the top, there was a ladder that could be pulled up or pushed away if there was someone on it already. So coming from above the balcony house, there was only a narrow entrance that was between two walls of rock, and it was curved, and it was curved in a way that a man with a bow could shoot right-handed, but intruders would have to shoot left-handed. Mm-hmm. Since there aren't that many left-handed bowmen, one or two right-handed bowmen could defend the whole village because attackers could only come one at a time and would have difficulty shooting in most cases. So in ancient societies, said all that to say that gates and entrances were very important to their very lives, to their security. The closest that we might even get relating to that is just to drive through a high crime neighborhood and see all the steel security doors and barred windows. But what is implied by all of this is that we are sheep, and sheep are relatively defenseless. We need protection, and we even need to be rescued from time to time. And of course, Jesus is our security. Amen. The thieves and robbers who came to steal the sheep would have liked for the sheep to believe that they were the true shepherds. That way, the sheep would follow them on their own, and they could lead more of them away, and maybe even the whole flock. So they're really imposters. The Jews of Jesus' day faced at least two sorts of imposters. First of all, there were religious leaders who acted very pious. And these were actually the equivalent in our day of preachers and teachers and elders. I mean, they often acted as if they cared for God's people when they really cared only for themselves. And then there was another kind of imposter And I wasn't saying all preachers, these elders fit that role, but they're in danger of fitting that role. So then there was another kind of imposter that was even more direct, and that were those with political ambitions. There were some who actually claimed to be the Christ, who would have said, I am the good shepherd. And the people were so anxious to be saved from the Romans that almost anyone who had the gall to try to get some to follow them could actually get some. And there are imposters in our world today who can threaten us. There are both kinds. There are those who are religious leaders who are in it for themselves. And we immediately think of TV evangelists, right? But there are power mongers within denominations that have power structures. And there are those who operate within just individual congregations as well. So how do we know whether someone who wants to lead us is an imposter? And even though some of us may not think that we're in a position of leadership, we're all in positions at times that place us in the role of a protector or even a rescuer. So how do we know that we are not acting as imposters in those roles? Well, there are 3 clues, and we each need to apply these to ourselves. How do we know that we are not imposters in the lives of others? These are the 3 clues. First of all, true shepherds are transparent. One dead giveaway is how we go about getting into our positions of influence. If it's just apparent, you know, it happens naturally. But you can be a boss, or you can be in a role of leadership in a church. A true shepherd who is modeled after Christ has nothing to hide. We are entrusted with the care of the sheep because we have shown ourselves to be trustworthy. Elders are only one example of leaders who should be modeled after Christ. Preachers, teachers, deacons, parents, most of us have some position of leadership. But the elders are even called shepherds, and listen to the qualities that put them where they are. Now, the overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, but one wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him with proper respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. So those qualities are what it takes to come in through the front door, through the gate. All right? And we all should be trying to be these kinds of persons. The reason that it's important for the elders to have all those qualities is because they're leading us to be those kinds of persons, to have those qualities. So how do imposters get in? Well, they get in by trickery and deceit. They use whatever it takes to get what they want. They use political maneuvering and sneak around behind the backs of others. They'll even use money, whatever it takes. Don't be just thinking of elders in this case. But I did know a man some years ago who was an elder who was very generous in helping others with his money. He happened to have a lot of money. But when he became involved once in trying to get his way in a church dispute, everybody was arguing, he went around reminding people how he had helped them with his money. He thought he could buy their loyalty. So we don't use good works or kindnesses to earn loyalty or influence or even love. We do what we do for others because that is how our shepherd treats us. So another way that we know an imposter from the real thing is that true shepherds are not achievers. That's in quotation marks. If you watch love stories, one of the common themes is a woman, usually, who is engaged to a guy who might be good looking and maybe has a great career, but then along comes a guy who seems to be a soulmate. I think I skipped forward to that too fast. Okay, we're back still on the other thing. Okay. And so along comes a guy, they're put in a position where they're working together or something, and they really connect. But too bad she's taken, and she can't let herself fall in love with this new guy because she's engaged or she has this boyfriend. Well, the turning point in the story will always be a realization that her fiance or her boyfriend doesn't really know her favorite color or her favorite flower or her favorite food or her birthday, or in one movie it was an allergy to some flower and he gave her those flowers. And so it dawns on her that he doesn't really know her. And this is one thing that true shepherds know, is they know us. And so the guy in the movie who's the late arriver in her life has shown a genuine interest in knowing her and everything about her. And so, you know the rest of the story. Okay, so now we get to that next point. Another way that we know the real thing from an imposter is that true shepherds are not achievers. Jesus never chose to serve the needs of those around him based on what they could do for him or how a relationship with him might affect his career. In fact, he often helped people who were outside the mainstream or who were even untouchables. This did not help his reputation with those who were in positions of influence. And this is good news for us, and we need to follow his lead. True shepherds are genuinely interested in those they are caring for rather than what they might get out of an assignment or a relationship. They know the sheep, and the sheep know them. And so this should be the goal of every relationship that all of us have. But leadership in a church especially can be damaging if a preacher or an elder or a teacher is not aware or does not care about sheep who are looking to them to protect them from all kinds of attacks and dangers that they face. So this is something we need to keep in mind as we choose who we look to and who we trust, but we also need to keep it in mind when we choose who we help and how much time and energy and maybe even money that we spend on people. I have to say that it's often very difficult to feel good about helping some people. When someone knocks on my door, those who ask for help are often those who have made poor choices in life, and they don't seem to be likely to go and leave their lives of sin, as Jesus told the woman caught in the act of adultery a couple of weeks ago. So do you think that woman seemed to be a likely prospect to become a good church member? Of course not. And if Jesus had been choosing on the basis of who could help his cause, she would have been maybe the last choice. So anyone who chooses to help people based on what they might do for you is not a true shepherd. You're not the real thing. If we do that, we are thieves and robbers who are just using people. We're not followers in the steps of Jesus. We're imposters. And we need to be aware of who we follow in this world when we're in the role of sheep. So by placing our full trust only in Jesus, we can avoid the threats of thieves and robbers. We'll only follow those who lead as he led. And they'll be front door leaders who have nothing to hide. And as a result, we'll know them. They'll know us. And since Jesus is the chief shepherd, we won't even be threatened if it turns out that someone that we're following turns out to be an imposter, because our trust won't be in men. So we won't be frightened or disillusioned. We'll simply run to the good shepherd when we realize that we've been following an imposter or there's an imposter in our midst. So the third way that we recognize a true shepherd won't show up until some other danger threatens the flock, and that is that true shepherds are defenders. Read verses 11 through 13. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. Now, this doesn't mean that the true shepherd loves the fight. He only fights because the sheep are threatened. and they are defenseless. But when the sheep are in danger, he gives no thought to his own safety. He stands his ground against the attacker, no matter how fierce he may be. And it takes no small amount of courage, since the attacker is actually no less than Satan himself. So there's only one enemy of God's people. And he will use all sorts of people, and he'll use all kinds of things against God's people. Yet even though he knows that he is fighting Satan himself, the true shepherd won't turn tail and run. So this is where it gets personal for preachers, for example, because we are usually financially supported for what we do. So anyone who gets anything in return for any service can be a hired hand. And there are really a few services that even preachers can perform that don't give us something back, or that we couldn't get something back for doing. And this is why I never ask to be paid for weddings or funerals. They always ask, how much do you charge? And those are just times when people can be vulnerable, either out of grief or joy. And another preacher that I worked with said that when the groom would ask him how much that he charged for weddings, he would say, well, just pay me whatever you think she's worth. And then he said he'd usually get $5, but I just say, I don't charge anything. This is just something that I'm happy to be involved in. So the question that divides hired hands from shepherds is this: will you stand your ground when it becomes dangerous or unpleasant to be there for them? When you think you could get more out of it somewhere else, do you take off at the first hint of danger? And so this is another danger for preachers, because some churches are able or willing to give more support than others. And support should really be how we view preachers' financial compensation rather than pay. Anyone who does what they do for others because they are paid to do it is a hired hand, to use Jesus' words. So the way that this temptation may come, though, for other church members is the practice of church shopping. Not buying things at churches, but choosing churches first on the basis of what the church can do for you, rather than what you can do for others because you're part of a church. So, and this can be very tricky, because it can seem like going to a church that has an uplifting worship style, or provides fun activities for kids, or maybe, does many other good things that will help you to be a better follower of Jesus. That's what that's all about. And that may be true some of the time. But on the other hand, a smaller or possibly less exciting church may be more likely to need everyone to pitch together just to keep any ministry going, any service to the community. There may be closer attention for each child. We have to pay attention to our own reasons and be honest about our motivations. And we need to be aware that there are people in positions of influence who are not trustworthy. They are not worthy of our trust. And so we don't choose a church just based on what it seems they can do for us. We choose it on the basis of what we can do in that church and what kind of service that church may be helping us to be a part of. So again, we need to only put our full trust in Jesus, not in a church, not in church members, not in preachers. So we are not disillusioned if a leader or even a church shows itself to be untrustworthy. Jesus wasn't suicidal, but he wasn't about to let his own fears keep him from taking care of his own sheep. And we need to be that way whenever we're in any position of leadership, whether it's at home or among the church family or at work. It's often easier to just get out of a situation than it is to change the situation for the better. There can be a time to leave the problem to others. That happens. Or to take a different approach than the head-on approach. But the basic rule is, when someone is in your care in some way, you lay down your life for them. You don't lay down your life to save your job or your pride. You lay it down for other people. Fighting is generally bad, unless you're fighting for people. They may be members of your family, or they may be just people who in some way are your responsibility. And that's when you will find out whether you have the heart of a hired gun who's in it for himself or the heart of a true shepherd. I have other sheep also that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. But no one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. When Jesus talks about these other sheep who were not of this sheep pen, at that time he was talking to Jews about us non-Jews. And John was writing as the church became less and less Jewish. He wrote much later than the other Gospels, and he wanted the non-Jewish Christians to know that Jesus knew them and talked about them long before they knew anything about him. Jesus has called us by name, and we have followed. Now, since Ernest is with us for the last Sunday, I need to tell you again about our high school version of the song that Derek chose without me knowing and him knowing what I was going to say. But the song is Softly and Tenderly, right? Well, some of our nonsense in the football locker room was not any more innocent than other football locker rooms, but we were a Christian school and we all knew the same songs, and we sang the same songs at church. And Ronnie Moore was one of our fellow students, and his dad's name was Ernest. And so we changed the words of the song just a little, because the chorus says, softly and tenderly Jesus is calling. Mm-hmm. Then earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling. Calling, oh sinner, come home. So our version said, softly and tenderly, Ernest is calling. Calling, oh Ronnie, come home. See, on the front porch, he's waiting and watching. Calling, oh Ronnie, come home. So we thought we were very clever and funny. But in a way, our version was actually closer to what Jesus is really doing. He doesn't just make a general call out to all sinners. He knows us by name. So softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling for you and for me, calling old Marky, come home. Marky was what I was called until I started school. And fill in your name. He knows us all. Jesus knows us by name. And Jesus didn't lay down his life because he had to. He did it by his own choice. Look again at verses 17 and 18. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. That's the voluntary spirit in which we must serve others. Now, you and I have made a choice, or you will make a choice. So what Jesus says here doesn't leave any neutral ground. It forces a decision on us. At these words, the Jews were again divided. Many of them said, he's demon-possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him? But others said, these are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? So there's your choice. You may have heard the point that C.S. Lewis made. He was a man who was an atheist who realized that this was a question that he had to face. The truth of this question: do you believe that Jesus' words are the words of a liar, a lunatic, or the Lord? And John says in the first verses that he's the Lord of all creation. So we have one advantage over these people who were divided on the question. We have the account of Jesus actually following through with what he said that he would do, laying down his life for us. He really did lay down his life. He didn't attempt to escape. He didn't even attempt to argue his defense. And he did it for Mark, and he did it for you. So what is our decision? Will we pattern our life after his, or will we live the life of a thief or a hired hand, robbing God of the glory that is his and living for ourselves, doing only the good that can make us look good to others or feel good, make others think that we are good, and might even bring us status in this life. Is that what our positions of influence are about? And that's our decision. Let's pray. Our Father, we are so thankful that we do have a good shepherd, that we can look to someone always when we are at decision points and turning points as to who we help and how we help and why we help. Father, help us to look to Jesus sooner rather than making the foolish errors that we sometimes make and struggling with the motivations that sometimes Satan tries to use to trip us up. Help us, Father, to believe that Jesus really does know our names and that he is calling us to be with him, at home with him. And we pray these things in his name. Amen.